Welcome to my next video.
I always wanted to say that.
I want to talk about care and control laws and motor vehicle safety in the van life. It's a topic I've never seen discussed, not by Bob Wells, not by any of them. And it's an issue that all of us need to be aware of. So let's say that you're sleeping in your vehicle and you're really content and you hear that knock on the door in the middle of the night. The officer rouses you, you open the door, and the officer asks you to step out of your vehicle. You're a little unsteady on your feet. I am unsteady on my feet all the time. I have a balance problem. So you can imagine how I would be in the middle of the night, right, being roused from a deep sleep, unsteady. Now let's talk about that for just a minute. This is your home. You're sleeping in your home. Some people do like to have a drink before they go to sleep. Other people take certain medications in order to sleep. And other people just take medications. So it doesn't really matter. You're not planning on driving. All you're doing is resting. But that's not how the motor vehicle laws look at it. Unfortunately, the DUI laws in the United States have gotten completely out of control. I am with the majority of people. I don't want drunk drivers on the road.
My problem is when they charge you with a DUI or driving while ability impaired when you haven't been drinking. You're not under the influence of any substances and they still charge you anyway. Trust me, it could happen to you.
So the care and control laws say that if you have the ability to put the key in the ignition, you're in care and control of that vehicle. Now I used to sleep with my key around my neck on a lanyard, so I always knew where it was. Or I would leave the key in the ignition so that I could get to it quickly. In case there was that dreaded knock in the middle of the night, I knew how to get the vehicle moving quickly without having to give it much thought. The point is, you don't have to be driving the vehicle to be found guilty of a DUI. All you have to do is be in possession of the key. There is even some argument that you don't even have to be in the vehicle. So obviously, if you're in the cargo area sleeping, you can be found guilty of driving under the influence or driving while your ability is impaired. It's that unfair. Defending against a care and control law is really easy. Just don't sleep in your motor vehicle. Well, maybe it's not so easy. But really, it's a matter of thinking things out before you go to sleep and doing them the same way every time. So what I do when I go to sleep, I put up my privacy curtains, my blackout curtains, I lock the door, and then I put the key in the glove box. What you don't want to do is have that key anywhere in the compartment where you are going to reside, because if that key is easily at your hand, you could be accused of the care and control problems. Let me say a little bit more about driving under the influence or operating a vehicle under the influence. Remember that when the police stops you, he's not your friend. You can have a nice, courteous conversation, and you must always be courteous to the officer, even if you don't feel that he's being fair or courteous to you. We have to take the burden on our shoulders and be courteous in the first place. But next, we don't want to give that officer any information that's not required. So, you're not going to certainly say, well, I had a drink earlier tonight. You're not going to show the officer that you only have one beer can in your compartment. You're not going to tell the officer about any medications that you might take to sleep or about any other substances that you have consumed. You're going to assume your right to remain silent throughout the interview, and you're going to answer the most basic questions. You have to identify yourself, you have to produce your license, you have to produce your registration and your insurance. But beyond that, you don't really need to say very much. If you have no substances in your system, you haven't been drinking, you're not under influence of any medications, then you probably want to get that on the record. Officer, I haven't been drinking, I'm not under the influence of any substances, I was just resting. I wouldn't even admit to sleeping. I would just say, I was resting. People start the process of self-incrimination right away. Often, the officer will ask you to do a roadside test. Now, if you're in the state of Colorado, at least, and every state does differ a little bit, you're going to refuse to do that roadside test because you could be perfectly sober. I mean, 100% perfectly sober. Do the roadside test, give the officer reason to say that your ability was impaired, and be found guilty. It's really unfair. The laws are really unfair. You do the roadside test. The officer is going to arrest you. Well, you haven't lost anything. He was going to arrest you anyway. If he gets to the point of asking for a roadside test, he thinks he has a case against you. But you're not going to give him that information. You're not going to self-incriminate by doing the roadside test. This is not the time to try and talk your way out of a DUI charge. Do not have a long discussion with the officer or argue with the officer or have a friendly conversation. What you're going to say is, here's my license, here's my registration, I haven't been drinking anything, I'm not under the influence of anything, officer, am I free to go? That's what you're going to say. Don't try to talk your way out of it, because it's the most sure way of finding yourself into even deeper trouble. Remember that everything you say can and will be used against you, and they'll take it out of context every time. The officer may also ask to search your vehicle, and your response is going to be, or should be, no sir, I would rather you not search my vehicle. And the officer is going to say, well, if you're innocent and you have nothing to hide, why can't we search your vehicle? Well, officer, being very courteous, you say, sir, it's my right. I do not want you to search my vehicle. If you get arrested, the officer probably will search your vehicle anyway, and they have a right to do what they call an inventory search. But you certainly don't want to have them searching your vehicle with your full permission. Give your attorney something to argue against in court. So now you've refused to let the officer search your vehicle. He has no other reasonable cause or probable cause to find you guilty of any crime or to accuse you of any crime. And so it's time for you to go. What some people do, a fatal mistake, is they hang around jawboning with the officer. And that's exactly what the officer is waiting for. He's waiting for the drug dogs to come so that they can accurately or falsely sit and indicate that you have substances in your car. Now you're back into trouble again. So if you're fortunate enough that the interview really should be over, don't sit there and jawbone with the officer. Move along. Some people might say, well, heck, I haven't been drinking, officer. I'm not under the influence. I'm just really tired. Well, you know what? That's enough for a driving while ability impaired charge. If you're too tired to drive, you can't be driving. If the officer doesn't have a reason to detain you anymore, move along. It's that simple. But that's probably not going to happen. Probably what's going to happen is because you refuse to do the roadside test, the officer is going to take action. Now you have to make some decisions. The officer will likely arrest you and transport you to take a test. And it's up to you, normally, at least in the state of Colorado, which test you take. You can either take the blood test or you can take the breath test. What you're going to ask for depends upon what your circumstances were before you went to sleep. If you've had a beer or you're under any substance, you're going to ask for the breath test. The breath test is less accurate and can be challenged in court. On the other hand, if you haven't had a thing to drink, if you are stone cold sober, then you're going to ask for the blood test. The blood test is very accurate and it will indicate whether you've had any substances in your system at the time the officer arrests you. Unfortunately, even if the breath test comes back showing that you're stone cold sober, the DA may still elect to prosecute the case. That's why everything that you do is important. Often in some cities, especially in the city of Denver, the officer will be wearing a vest cam, and all of your activities are being recorded. You want to look as cool and collected on the vest cam as possible. You want to not slur your speech, and you want to speak very concisely, but very clearly. So think about that as the officer is standing there intimidating you with those big bright lights flashing in your face. That's kind of how it works. The DA doesn't have time to look at all the vest cam footage of every person that goes to court. So what you're going to do, and what a good attorney will do, is set the matter for trial. And at that point, the DA is going to start looking at the case more seriously. And if you look good on the vest cam, then the DA is more likely to make a deal with you that you can live with. I would rather take some careless driving or some minor charge than risk a guilty verdict in a DUI trial. One thing you want to guard against is a refusal case. A refusal case happens when you refuse to take the blood or the breath test. Now you have to make that decision up as you're being transported to the police department.
Otherwise, you're going to lose your license. And it doesn't matter whether you win or lose your DUI trial. Well, nothing I've said today should be confused with legal advice. You have to make your own decisions. You should consult with a good attorney before this ever happens, and then you're prepared.
Some people say, I don't drink, I don't do substances, I'm not going to worry about this in my van life. And my response is, all of us need to worry. While getting charged with DUI is pretty rare, it can happen, and you wouldn't be the first guy to go to jail when you're innocent. Please pass the video along. There isn't much information about it on the net, and this is something every van dweller should know.
Lastly, I didn't make this video to help people drink and drive. I made this video so that people who haven't had a thing to drink don't get wrongfully convicted.
Well, this is Tim Painter for the Van Life. If you like what you see, well, like it. And we'd love to hear your comments. They're so very valuable. And of course, we'd love to have you subscribe. It's kind of the lifeblood of the channel. Well, we'll see you all later, and take care.